What's going on, everybody? Welcome into episode 62 of the MudWatch Sports Podcast on this Monday, March 24th, 2025. I'm your host, Zach Malin. But before we get started, please subscribe below. Follow all of my social accounts. Switching things up today, let's start things off in the world of college basketball. As New York's team this season, the St. John's Red Storm, had their magical run and season come to an end on Saturday afternoon. A 75-66 loss to the 10-seeded Arkansas Razorbacks. Johnnies were obviously the 2 seed out of the West region and expected to go much further than just the round of 32. But the thing that was bothering some Johnny fans during the season, even though they were 31-4 heading into this game, what if their shooting was off one day in the tournament? Would that be their downfall? It ultimately was. The Johnnies only shot 28% from the field in this game. They shot 9% from beyond the arc, 2 of 22. They were from the three-point line. And then when you look at free throws, they only shot 71% from the charity strike. And even though they out-rebounded Arkansas, a very tough and physical team to go up against out of the SEC, they out-rebounded them 51-45. But if you can't shoot the ball and you can't score, how are you going to win games? And that was really the problem for the Johnnies in this one. A very bad shooting day overall for a lot of the Johnnies' top players. They did deal with some foul trouble for a guy like Kadari Richmond, who ultimately fouled out with 5 minutes to go in this game. But I don't really think that was the difference. I think the difference overall in this game was R.J. Lewis Jr., the star all year long for St. John's, the Big East player of the year. He shot 3 of 17 from the field and 0 of 3 from beyond the arc. He had 7 rebounds, no assists in this game, along with 2 steals. The difference for the Johnnies in this game was that R.J. Lewis, their star man, did not show up. He was nowhere to be found. 3 of 17, only had 9 points. And I think in the end, the decision of Rick Pitino to bench R.J. Lewis for the last 5 minutes, 6 minutes or so of this game was the right one in the end. He was not a leader at all in this game for St. John's, and obviously a guy who's meant to be a leader and one of the top leaders for this team, and really taking the ball into his hands in the big moments and getting the job done. He did none of that, and obviously in the end, Rick Pitino benches him for the last couple of minutes of this game. I think that ended up being the big storyline coming out of this game, was that where was R.J. Lewis in the last couple of minutes when the Johnnies had to mount a comeback here? He did not play well enough in the first 30 minutes of that game to be on the floor. I think that's the difference between some other coaches and a guy like Rick Pitino, a Hall of Famer in Rick Pitino. He's not going to stand for that kind of stuff. If you're really bad on offense and not playing well on offense, no assists in this game, like I said, not giving up the ball and just forcing up shots, and then the effort on the defensive side is not there, you belong on the bench next to Rick Pitino, and he really proved that in this one. It's a learning lesson for a guy like R.J. Lewis Jr., especially in a game like this, NCAA tournament, season on the line, and really fighting for all your seniors and the guys who really have built this program this year. He's really the top guy that they should be relying on, and he did not come up big for St. John's in this game. He deserved to be on the bench in the end for the last couple of minutes. I think that even though that was the big storyline, I think it's all but nothing, because it proves that if you're not going to put in the effort on the offensive end and then you're going to run back on defense and not put in the effort there, you really belong on the bench. So that's really the story right now, and I think none of it for R.J. Lewis Jr. He has probably a senior year that he's looking at, and maybe coming back to St. John's. I'm sure NIL money is going to have to do with it, plus the fact that he may be in the NBA draft portal, and we'll see what happens there. Could be an interesting situation for R.J. Lewis. I think he will end up back with Rick Pitino and St. John's for his senior year, but you never know. And it's a real sour note if this is the last game that R.J. Lewis Jr. plays for the Red Storm. 3 of 17 from the field, just 9 points in the biggest game of the season. But on the other side for Arkansas, they played very well in this game, and they just caused St. John's a bit of trouble with their size and athleticism, really pushing St. John's around in the end. And I think they just had more toughness in the end. the Arkansas Razorbacks did, and I think that was the difference in the game. But I mean, they are bringing back a lot of guys from injury. They were even without Abdou Thiero, who was their top scorer when Boogie Flan was out for most of this season. Talk about Boogie Flan. He came back and came off the bench in this game. He's back for the NCAA tournament, had a really good first round game against Kansas, and then comes into this one. Didn't play great overall shooting wise, only shot 2 of 8 and 1 of 5 from 3, but the difference on the floor, had those couple of big assists that he had in this game, 4 rebounds as well, and the help on the defensive end. I think really Arkansas is a team to worry about. I know they play Tech on Thursday now, and that could be a tough game for Arkansas, and definitely a powerful Texas Tech team they're going to have to go up against. But this Arkansas team is very tough, very athletic, and they have a lot of power down low. Guys like Trevon Brazile. Carter Knox is really not too much of a big, but he can play down low and gets a bunch of rebounds. And then you have Jonas Adu, who's also down low. And as long as they stay out of foul trouble, a Visic coming off the bench and a transfer that came in with Calipari to Arkansas, I think when you look at that, he's got to stay out of foul trouble as well. He fouled out in this game pretty early on and only played 10 minutes. If they keep their bigs out of foul trouble, this is a very tough team to go up against and not a true 10 seed, as they dealt with a lot of injuries this year and would be seeded much, much higher if they had a lot of health this season and had those guys healthy for a lot of this year. So a big time win for Arkansas and a well-deserved win in the end. They just really out-toughed the St. John's Red Storm. Not an easy thing to do, and they figured out a way to do so in the end. So give credit to Arkansas, who come up with the win, and they're on to the Sweet 16. Just looking at some more college basketball games in a college basketball update, just looking at the round of 32 and some big-time wins for the big guys in this tournament. A lot of the 1s and 2 seeds end up winning. Auburn really handles Creighton and Ryan Kalkbrenner, his size down low, in a 47-point second half for Auburn after they trailed by 2 at halftime. Give credit to the Auburn Tigers on to the Sweet 16. Houston fights off Gonzaga, and they do so with 30 points from their star man, LJ Cryer. What a tournament he's had so far, and give credit to Gonzaga. They really fought hard till the end, and a team that really, in my mind, shouldn't have been an 8 seed, should have been much higher than that, even though they had 9 losses this year out of the WCC. Definitely had a hard matchup here against the top seed Houston. So I think you got to give credit to Gonzaga, but also give credit to the toughness of Houston and a very tough win that they grab in the end behind their star man, LJ Cryer. When you look at the other couple of games, Tennessee handles UCLA, and the 2 seed in the Midwest region moves on to the Sweet 16. Some upsets, as we had BYU take down Wisconsin in a thriller, and they really go back and forth, these two teams. That one was out in Denver, and BYU, give them credit. They put up a number of points, and they put up so many points that Wisconsin just did not have an answer. Give credit to John Tanji as well, though, on Wisconsin. Was their leader all this year, and their leading scorer throughout. Had 37 to try and help the Badgers move on to the Sweet 16, but BYU just had just enough to get by Wisconsin, 91-89. They win a thriller out in Denver. Michigan ends up upsetting, not really too much of an upset, but upsets Texas A&M, a 5 seed over a 4 seed, 91-79, and Vlad Golden was a monster in this game, 23 points, and he had 12 rebounds to go with it with 3 blocks. So give credit to the big men down low. They had 56 points in the second half, Michigan did, and what a high-scoring team they were in this one against Texas A&M, who you probably expected a little bit more on the defensive side, and it just did not come in this game. You also had wins from Texas Tech and Purdue on Saturday to move them as well to the Sweet 16. Just looking quickly at Sunday's games, and Duke handles Baylor, the 1-9 game in Raleigh out of the East region. Duke continues to roll, and I don't know who's stepping in their way in the East. It's just going to be a very tough game. I think probably once they face Alabama, if that does happen in the Elite Eight, we'll see. I think that's probably just the toughest game Duke will face in this NCAA tournament if it does happen. But for right now, I don't think anybody is getting past Duke. They are a wagon out of the East region, and they continue to roll, just dominating teams. And the first couple of games, they looked very, very strong, especially with the return of their star man, Cooper Flagg. Let's look at Florida as well, and they played in a thriller. That one down in Raleigh as well, but this one was out of the West region. The 1 seed Florida taking on the 8 seed UConn, and give credit to the Huskies, the two-time defending national champs. They come in to a very tough environment taking on Florida, and they gave Florida a real run here. Tied at halftime, 31 apiece, and then they were leading in this game, UConn was, until a guy named Walter Clayton comes up big and just absolutely takes this game into his hands and hits 2 monster threes, had a couple of great assists down the stretch in this one, but the 2 monster threes by Walter Clayton, tough shots as well, gives Florida some cushion, and they end up getting a 77-75 win to move on to the Sweet 16 in the West region. A lot of people's favorite to win the national championship, and they continue to roll, and they survive and advance in the West region. So give credit to Florida. Tough game, and not really a game that you expect in the round of 32 for the 1 seed out of the West, but they handle business and they survive and advance, like I said, out of the West region. When you look at the other games here, and up in Cleveland, Alabama handled St. Mary's. Michigan State, even though they started off slow, handles New Mexico. And then you finish things off in Milwaukee, where you look at Kentucky, who had a very nice game against Illinois, and an 84-75 win for Kentucky. They handled business, and a great win overall for Kentucky in a game that they were not favored in. They were actually underdogs heading into that game, but Kobe Brea as well as Lamont Butler, 2 of the best in the backcourt in the country, and they handled business here. Give credit to the Wildcats, who are on to the Sweet 16 to face Tennessee for the 3rd time this season. Wildcats are 2-0 in those games against Tennessee this season, so that one should be a great one later this week. And then the last couple of games, Maryland survives as they take down number 12 Colorado State, who hit a late 3 to take the lead. Maryland down in that game at halftime, 37-30, but then they come up with the goods up in Seattle, and Derek Queen is the hero as he beats the buzzer with a controversial type of play. A lot of people saying that it could have been a travel. My mind, I think it was a clean play, and obviously the gather step helps that. 1.5 steps, you heard a lot of people saying in the end, and that's the difference for Maryland. But give credit to Derek Queen. That's a tough shot with a couple of guys on him late in a game to beat the buzzer and send Maryland to the Sweet 16. Big-time play by the freshman Derek Queen. Then you finished off the night with Arizona surviving in a tough test against their old Pac-12 rival, Oregon, and the 5-seeded Ducks head home with their leader, Jackson Shellstad, had 25 points in this one, but the guy on the other side, Caleb Love, was the difference here. 29 points, and I feel like Caleb Love is one of those guys that just shows up in the biggest moments when his team needs him the most. He is always there, and give credit to Caleb Love. 29 points, 9 rebounds, and he moves Arizona on to the Sweet 16. So this is a big stretch of college basketball. We'll obviously talk and preview the games, the Sweet 16 games on Wednesday's episode. Make sure you tune in as we continue to roll on in March Madness. Sweet 16 and Elite 8 coming up next weekend in college basketball. Let's move things to the NBA as the New York Knicks are in action tomorrow night. A 7:30 start taking on the Dallas Mavericks at MSG. Let's quickly look back to the Knicks' previous game. A Saturday night win for the New York Knicks, 122-103, and it got a little close at the end when you look at this game for the Knicks, and you might be saying, How is it close? The Knicks won by 19. This one was real close as the Knicks only had a 4-point lead early in the fourth quarter, 92-88. They led this one, and then they went on a great run, 122-103. They close out the victory. Give credit to Karl-Anthony Towns in this one. 31 points and 11 rebounds for the Knicks in this game. And also give credit to some guys off the bench who played some big minutes, one of them being Tyler Kolek, who came off the bench. Deuce McBride missed this game, so Cam Payne ended up starting. He had a solid game, 13 points, 7 assists, but Tyler Kolek comes off the bench and provides 8 assists in 18 minutes for the New York Knicks. So give credit where credit is due, and Kolek coming up in some big minutes for the Knicks, and they get a big-time victory over the Washington Wizards, and one that you almost take a breath if you're a Knicks fan after a couple of losses to San Antonio and Charlotte, both on the road. They come back home without Jalen Brunson still out of the lineup for this game, and they end up winning comfortably in the end, 122-103. But obviously the noise of Jalen Brunson and still unsure when he will be back. They're probably expecting in the next couple of weeks or so, but they also do not want to risk Jalen Brunson, especially with the postseason less than a month away and pretty soon coming in the NBA. So obviously that's a big storyline right now. And like I said, they're not going to risk Jalen Brunson if they don't need to. They do take on a Dallas Mavericks team tomorrow as we look at that game that is really struggling with injuries so far this season and has dropped plenty of the last couple of games. 34-37 they sit in the Western Conference, looking for wins to still make a final push for the postseason. But Anthony Davis is a game time decision in this game, and Caleb Martin has been ruled out. Daniel Gafford's out right now. Derek Lively's out right now, and obviously the injury to Kyrie Irving, he's out for the year. So Dallas is really struggling with injury. It should be a comfortable win for the New York Knicks, but you never know with this team, especially with Jalen Brunson out of lineup. I'm still expecting guys like Mikal Bridges to really step up in this time period. He's done a good job in the last couple of games, but obviously they had those 2 losses against San Antonio as well as Charlotte, where I felt like some of those guys were just invisible and you really couldn't find them in those kind of moments. I think that's when you need them the most, especially guys like Bridges, Anunoby, who are really trying to really take some of the load off a guy like Karl-Anthony Towns. So we'll see what happens tomorrow night, but the Knicks then play a back-to-back against the LA Clippers. We'll preview that game on Wednesday and obviously recap the game tomorrow against the Dallas Mavericks. But make sure you tune in. 7:30 start tomorrow night as the Knicks host the Dallas Mavericks at 7:30 at MSG. Well, let's talk about just the starting rotation for both the Yankees and the Mets, as opening day is Thursday. We're only 3 days away from the start of Major League Baseball, and really a great thing to be back at, especially for some of these New York teams that have some high hopes for the season. Really more so on the Mets side than the Yankees side, especially with all the injuries that have happened to the Yankees so far this spring. I still think that they are one of the top teams in the American League and still are going to make a push in the American League. I wouldn't worry too much about reaching 90 wins or so. I think they're going to do that, even with the pitching rotation not where it's supposed to be right now. But you look at this rotation, and it's Carlos Rodon who's going to get the nod on opening day. Probably going to see Max Fried in game 2. And then you got a couple of more guys in Marcus Stroman, who didn't expect to be a starter this season for the Yankees. And then you have a couple more guys and a rookie in Will Warren, who's trying to really settle things down in Major League Baseball. And I think when you look at Will Warren last season, it was a real struggle for Will Warren, and he's trying to really bounce back after a couple of rough games last season that really had him at a monster ERA in his MLB career. So that's not a great sign for the Yankees, but you're hoping that the confidence that he's gotten and how well he's looked in spring, that he could bounce back and have a good start to this season. Obviously waiting for a guy like Luis Gil to come back from injury, and that's not going to be till probably June and maybe even July. Clark Schmidt has had a setback in his injury, so he's going to be out for a little while for the Yankees, hoping for him to come back. So you have Will Warren And you also got a guy in Carlos Carrasco, who's been an MLB veteran, and a veteran in Carlos Carrasco that, it really has had his ups and downs. Spent some time in the minor leagues, just struggling to really find his footing on an MLB roster, and did so for the Mets last season. And it was not pretty when he was pitching for the Mets a season ago, and that's why he spent some time in the minor leagues trying to get back to that form that he was in when he was really rolling for the Cleveland Guardians back in 2017 or so, 2018 range. And that's really where you're looking at Carlos Carrasco. And you're not expecting that peak form, but you're expecting just a little bit. And the veteran presence as well in that rotation. I think it's a solid move by the Yankees to get him on a major league contract. And we'll see what happens, as they desperately need some guys to just take up some innings, as they can't rely on that bullpen forever. And I think that's going to be big for the Yankees to start this season. On the other side for the Mets, they have a rotation that's a bit questionable themselves. And obviously, as a Yankee fan myself, it's just a little weird still seeing Clay Holmes as the opening day starter for the New York Mets. I think it's just going to be, it's going to take some time. I understand that he's had a great spring and has looked really, really good in 5 starts in spring training, but I do think this one is going to take a little bit of time to get rolling as a starting pitcher and get rolling under 5-6 innings, get those innings under your belt. And it's not easy for a guy who's been a reliever and just one inning after another for the last couple of years of his career, ever since 2018, when he last started a game for the Pittsburgh Pirates. So we'll see what happens, but he gets the ball in their opening day bout against the Houston Astros. That one 4-10 on Thursday. And after that, you got Griffin Canning as well as Tyler McGill. And then you got a couple guys in David Peterson and Kodai Senga. A lot of expectation for Kodai Senga this year to really step up and be the Mets ace, especially without a guy like Sean Manaea, who's going to be out for a little bit due to injury. And then David Peterson had a very strong end of the season last year, and I think really a strong season overall for the New York Mets. You're expecting that to continue. If you're a Mets fan, I think the worry comes when you're looking at a guy like Tyler McGill, who, yeah, he's not a he's a starting pitcher, but he's not a true starting pitcher in my mind. More so a guy who can come out of the bullpen, be a long reliever, and that's what he's been for the last couple of years. I don't know if I could really rely on him as a number 2 starter right now for the New York Mets. And then you got a guy in Griffin Canning who could have some solid stuff to offer hitters, but you're also looking at his lines from the last couple of years, and the ERA was way up last year, over 6 in his season with the Los Angeles Angels. You could say, maybe based on he was with a down team in that one. I think that one comes down to Canning, and he needs to be better. And that probably could help with a guy like Jeremy Hefner, people like David Stearns, who really look for some good stuff out of pitchers. And Griffin Canning could be a surprise for the New York Mets. But that's their 5-man rotation, and it should be interesting to see what happens as Clay Holmes gets the start for the New York Mets on Thursday, taking on the Houston Astros, and Carlos Rodon gets the ball for the New York Yankees Thursday at 3 o'clock, and the primetime start for the Yankees on ESPN, as Rodon will face Freddie Peralta and the Milwaukee Brewers on Thursday. But that'll do it for episode 62 of the MudWatch Sports Podcast. Please subscribe below. I've been Zach Mellon, but thanks for watching, and talk to you all on Wednesday.